Neil Findlay, if I could start with you, why did you join with the SNP and Green and Lib Dem MPs yesterday in voting against the EU withdrawal bill?
Well, the situation that we have in relation to the devolved powers that will be repatriated following Brexit is that those powers would ordinarily come to the Scottish Parliament, and yet the proposal that's been put forward is that those powers would be held and decided on at Westminster, then passed on to the Scottish Parliament. And that is not the way that devolution is set out. The reserve powers model that we have under the devolved settlement is that the issues that are reserved are written down and everything else is devolved. And that cut across that principle of devolution that Labour has defended and sought to strengthen since the 1990s.
So the default is that unless it's specifically kept by Westminster, like foreign policy and the like, and defence policy, then it's devolved. And yes. You're saying, well, this goes against that. But what I don't understand, yes, Neil, is why you in Scotland have been so happy, and it was the majority of Scots in that vote in the EU referendum, quite happy to have so many of these powers held by Brussels. But when it's held by Westminster, then you've suddenly got a problem.
Well, that's an issue that is up to the Scottish people. The Scottish people took their decision on Brexit, but the vote was a UK-wide vote. That was the constituency, and we respect that. We respect that result. What we don't respect is the UK government seeking to undermine the devolved settlement. That's what we.
But what I don't understand. No, Neil. What I don't understand. You weren't bothered, and apparently the majority of the Scottish people are not bothered by Brussels holding those powers. But it does bother you if Westminster holds those powers. Surely it's better that your own country holds those powers than a foreign body.
Well, that's a different argument. The argument at the moment is about the devolved powers.
I understand that. Do you not see there is a link there?
If you're doing an interview, surely it's up to me to respond.
I just want you to answer the question I've asked.
Well, I'll prefer to answer it in my own time if you stop talking. What I'm saying is that those powers are coming from Brussels. The situation we're dealing with at the moment is that those powers should be coming to the Scottish Parliament. And what we're seeing is the UK government intervening and attempting to take those powers. That is not the devolution settlement.
OK. All right. Bernard Jenkin, now you're a eurosceptic. Now, we know that obviously different constituent parts of the UK did vote differently. But obviously after the Scottish independence vote back in 2014, we know that has seen to be, certainly by Westminster, has been a settled matter. Is this not going to create more problems in terms of devolution, in terms of Scottish nationalism, by upsetting Scots, perhaps some would say, I certainly see Neil Findlay saying unnecessarily, by those powers going to Westminster rather than going directly to the Scottish Parliament?
Well, there's something of a manufactured row here. But, of course, the powers that we're talking about were held by the European Union and were never held by the Scottish Parliament. And the government has completely redrafted this bit of the withdrawal bill in order to accommodate the sensitivity that actually these powers will in the end come to the Scottish Parliament. But during the process of transition, while we're sorting out, a UK fishing policy and a UK agriculture policy and a UK environment policy, which is all policies being run by the European Union so far, until we sort these things out, the sensible thing is for Westminster to hold these powers. And what's really disappointing, it's one thing for the nationalists to make a row about this, but it's really disappointing the Scottish Labour Party's joined in too. It just shows that they'll always play the Scottish card rather than do the responsible thing.
Neil Findlay, the responsible thing is what Bernard Jenkin calls it?
Well, the responsible thing, Bernard, would not be to play into the hands of the nationalists. That's what has been done here. If this had been handled sensibly and the negotiations had gone on and been successful, then we wouldn't be in this position. It's the Tories' mishandling of it that's got us to this place. Labour put forward amendments in the House of Commons that would have resolved this situation months ago. And Tory MPs, despite saying that the proposals were not fit for purpose, Tory MPs were whipped to vote against it. It was a ludicrous position that the Tories have got us into, and the blame lies fairly and squarely there.
But so the British government has actually published proposals that would see, in their words, quote, the vast majority of the 158 areas where policy is devolved currently go directly to Scottish Parliament and indeed Welsh Parliament as well. But there are just 24 areas where there's the UK Parliament, the British Parliament, wants to retain power temporarily in the wake of Britain's exit, and that includes areas of agriculture, fisheries, public procurement and the like. And they're saying it's just a temporary restriction. Do you not see, Neil, any argument for there being any temporary restriction, or are you concerned that actually it won't be temporary and those powers won't be devolved eventually?
Well, that is a danger, but I think the issue is not about individual policies, it's about the principle of this, because those powers should go to Scotland. We then give consent for those negotiations to build those common frameworks to take place. No one has a problem with developing those common frameworks across the UK single market, a UK single market that the nationalists don't even believe exists. However, we want to ensure that those common frameworks are developed. That's common sense policy, but we have to do it in the right way, and that is with the consent of the Scottish Parliament.
OK, well, the Scottish Secretary, David Mundell, Bernard Jenkin, he has said he's disappointed by the vote, but he's also said, fundamentally the Westminster Parliament is sovereign and can proceed. Should the government go ahead and basically ignore this vote, or should they try to come to some sort of compromise?
Well, we're not ignoring this vote. In the end, Parliament, Westminster, has to make a decision. And if the Scottish Parliament has sort of taken the ball off the pitch, there's nothing we can do about that. I mean, the difficulty that Neil has is that the Labour-led Welsh Assembly has agreed to the arrangements that we've negotiated. The same arrangements we've negotiated with the Scottish Parliament, Scottish Labour is rejecting. And I don't think the Labour Party and the rest of the United Kingdom is very happy with the Labour Party in Scotland for joining in this nationalist campaign. I'm afraid it's what the Scottish Labour have always done. They've always played the nationalist card to try and make themselves popular in Scotland. And it's one of the reasons why the nationalists in the end did so well, because they've always been supported by the Labour Party. The Conservatives, and the Liberals have done the same, the Liberal Democrats, the Conservatives in Scotland are the only truly unionist party that's prepared to fight for the union. And the Conservatives were not happy with what the government originally proposed. They've been involved in these negotiations and helped get some changes. And it's very disappointing that now that the Conservatives are supporting that and think the changes are good enough and good enough for the Labour Party in Wales, they're not good enough for the Labour and the SNP in Scotland. I mean, it's a nonsense. I mean, I'm sure there'll be a big row in Scotland because that's what the SNP wants. It's disappointing the Labour Party are helping the SNP on this because the SNP wants to break up the United Kingdom. Remember, they're not interested in harmony between Westminster and Holyrood. It's just a great shame the Labour Party are behaving so irresponsibly.
Bernard Jenkin, thank you. Final word to you briefly, Neil Findlay. Bernard says this is all just going to lead to the breakup of the United Kingdom.
The words of a man who hasn't a clue what he's talking about, has no understanding of what's happening in Scotland or Scottish politics. That was the ramblings of someone who is just reading off some crib sheet given to him. Utter nonsense.
But Bernard, if you are still there, if you would like to have a word back after that.
Well, I am chairman of the Constitution Committee in the House of Commons. I personally visited Holyrood 4 times and had lots and lots of dialogue with SNP, Labour, Liberal Democrat and academics about this problem. And I think even some of the SNP, Mike Russell, the Constitution spokesman, I think he's disappointed he's been unable to persuade Nicola Sturgeon to reach an agreement. So I don't think even the SNP, parts of the SNP are very happy.
All right, we're going to leave it there.